With each chime of the fire cricket's chirp and every hoot of the midnight raptors, Eijirou found himself growing more and more bored. You and Katsuki slept soundly, warmed by the roaring fire and balmy night air, while Eijirou stared off into the darkness of the forest. He didn't mind night's watch. It was a necessity for when they slept under the stars. The problem was, it wasn't terribly stimulating. He'd begun swishing his tail back and forth from pent-up energy, and what was worse was the slight peckish feeling that plagued his idle mind. It was taking all of his willpower to not rummage in their bags for a snack. He knew Katsuki would either wake up to catch him red-handed and throw an explosion in his face, or find the food rations missing the next day and deal the same punishment. His hand found its distraction in your hair. It was softer than any others he knew. What had you attributed it to again? Kampu and Sondishna? Either way, your delicate strands reminded him of the few royals he'd come across. Save Katsuki, who cared as much about his hair as he cared about a worm under his foot. Eijirou dragged clawed fingers through your hair carefully, taking caution not to catch a stubborn knot and wake you. It calmed him. Not just the repeated motion, but that your sleep was serene, heavy without worry. He and Katsuki were trained to react, even in the dregs of sleep. Well, Katsuki more than him. However, you, coming from a world without the dangers they faced, your sleep was precious to him, something to be preserved. His fear was that the longer you stayed in their perilous reality, the faster this little bit of peace would slip away from you. A noise pricks Eijirou's sharp ears, lighting his muscles with readiness. His eyes narrowed, attempting to cut through the shadows. The woods answered his suspicion with laughter, tender and tingling laughter that danced along the breeze like dandelion fuzz. The darkness gave way to little lights, dots of brightness at first, and then brighter and flitting through trees. The lights were fast, making fleeting green lanterns of the leaves they hid behind. Eijirou leaned over you, reaching out to tap Katsuki awake, but then the lights shot out of the trees, forcing him to flinch back. He hardened his skin instinctively, and then relaxed as he discovered the little creatures fluttering just across the red sea of his eyes. 2 pixies with grey skin and wide, pupilless black eyes faced Eijirou. They were no bigger than his large fingers and hovered close enough to his face for his eyes to cross slightly. Their wings emitted white light, turning them into floating stars that captivated the crimson dragon. "Hi there," Eijirou greeted, unsurely. The little creatures giggled and whispered to each other, as though Eijirou amused them. A lightness crept along his limbs and mind, spreading until a smile stretched onto his face. A feeling like gliding down the smoothest river without worry or care of what lay beyond the calm waters. Eijirou was about to speak again, to wonder about the dainty face, but one shot forward sharply, demanding his focus. It held a thin finger to its closed mouth. "Quiet," it seemed to say. Eijirou nodded numbly. The likeness enveloped him, bringing with a hazy, wondrous feeling after following the first order. The pixie then stretched its delicate arm to him, and then pulled it towards itself. "Come," it said. "Follow me." Eijirou rose, his mind narrowing to the little star. As it moved away, he was overcome with the need to follow the enchanting entity, to follow the lightness that invaded his heart with cool waters on a summer's day, and refreshing glides along the sky currents. And so, he followed, with every other aspect of the world being shadowed to black against the starlight. As he walked, his tail, swinging happily behind him, dragged over you. It stirred you from your sleep soon enough to catch his feet retreating into the forest. You rise onto your elbows, blinking in confusion. Eijirou? You rasp. Where? You suck in a sharp breath as a light shoots to you. The lightness engulfs you as soon as you gaze down at the little star. Your vision clouds over, and your tense muscles instantly relax. When you breathe, it is as though the freshest morning air has entered your lungs and thrums through your veins, and you're sure that you could float, as a feather does, along the breeze. The light floats higher and pulls you smoothly from your bedroll. It floats away, and you are compelled to follow, into the woods, trailing unhurriedly after Eijirou. Katsuki woke to sunlight, and irritation followed. Eijirou was supposed to wake him up for his watch, and waking to the morning birds meant he'd likely fallen asleep sometime in the night. Katsuki rose, his mouth already open and ready to yell until the scaly idiot's ears fell off. However, there was no one to yell at, not even you. "Should he hear?" Katsuki called. "Traveler?" Only the rustle of trees answered him. "For fuck's sake," Katsuki growled as he hurriedly got off his bedroll. He didn't pause to pack their things, knowing that something must have happened for the both of you to be out of earshot. He checked the foliage and dirt for traces of you and Eijirou, and noticed near your bedroll were snapped branches. He inspected the area, finding that certain bushes had twigs on the floor and broken pieces. Eijirou's tail, Katsuki realized. There was a clear path cut out through the trees, and Katsuki didn't hesitate to charge through. A million possibilities of what could have happened flicking through his head. There didn't seem to have been a struggle, at least not one loud enough to wake him. If whoever had taken you and Eijirou had somehow sedated the large dragon, there would be dragging marks on the ground. Eijirou was too heavy for even a group of people to lift without struggling after a few paces. And why take you? A live dragon would be worth more gold than they could carry. You'd be no use to them. And why not kill Katsuki in his sleep for good measure? And why leave such an obvious trail behind? Could dragon hunters afford to be so careless? Or were they hoping Katsuki would follow? Katsuki had woken a good few hours after daybreak, and the forest was bright. However, across the path that Katsuki hastily followed, there was a wide clearing that glowed, almost unnaturally. It reminded him of the sunlight outside of the dark forest. With how the clearing light dimmed the rest of the woods, it screamed wrong. But Katsuki followed the path to the edge. He could not afford caution, not when it came to you and Eijirou missing for who knew how many hours. He stepped onto the border of the clearing, taking in the richly colored meadow. An expanse of the greenest grass and multitudes of various flowers covered the ground, so no speck of dirt was seen. The sunlight bared down, throwing every little ladybug, butterfly, and bee sitting on delicate petals into a vividly artistic sight. Though Katsuki could see the forest curve around the clearing from where he stood hesitantly at the entrance. Beyond it, the beautiful plain seemed to stretch through eternity. Magic thrummed conspicuously through the air. He could taste its spark on his tongue, and each gulp of air spoke. Come, rest, sleep. And though the floral smell was heavenly, and the grass below seemed softer than any bed he had laid on before, he could feel the true intent of the wondrous meadow. Come, rest, sleep, die amongst that which is more beautiful than you. And amongst the meticulously structured meadow, you and Eijirou were. Two beings that were so well placed, it was as though you both were painted into the canvas, by the artists themselves. Both dragon and human giggle cross-legged on the floor, happiness pure and open, exuding from the wideness of your smiles and the sparkle in your eyes. Eijirou leaned forward, placing a flower crown laced with fire lilies, aster, and freesia atop your head, and you returned the gesture with a similar crown of your own. Both of you gazed at each other, as though enamored by the sight of the other in their personalized gifts. Katsuki hadn't noticed it before, but as he stepped into the clearing, intent on getting the both of you out of this bizarre environment, he caught something circling, two glints, like specks of sunlight that had escaped its sphere, orbited you both at even paces. Just as he stepped into the meadow, the glints of light sped up, their light almost leaving a trail, a circle reminiscent of a large halo. Eijirou reached for you, his large hands coming to rest tenderly at your neck. You were unfazed by the action, only smiled sweetly as Eijirou squeezed his clawed hands around your throat. All caution drained from Katsuki in an instant. He charged forward, into the heart of the meadow, yelling as loud as he could to break the obvious trance. "Eijirou, wake up! Wake up!" But neither of you heard him, hadn't even glanced in his direction, just gazed at each other, not unlike lovesick fools. Katsuki could see you relaxing, your limbs falling limp. Though you didn't struggle, your lungs did, your chest moved up and down as though you were desperate to escape and retrieve the air they were being denied. Your eyelids drooped, and you swayed, leaning into Eijirou's hands as though they weren't trying to kill you. Katsuki got there before your eyes shut. He tackled Eijirou to the ground, bringing you down with them, but thankfully out of Eijirou's claws. "Snap out of it, you idiots!" Katsuki shouted. The little glints fluttered away when Katsuki broke their trance-like circling, and with their disappearance, Eijirou's eyes began to clear. His pupil size reduced significantly, giving way for the sunset red to blossom. He blinked up at Katsuki in confusion. "Katsuki? What?" He was cut off by your desperate gasp for air. "Traveler!" Eijirou exclaimed, rushing up from under Katsuki to come to you. "What happened?" You were on the ground, clutching your throat as you struggled to suck in breath. Eijirou pulled you up gently, lending his arm as a backrest as you coughed and shuddered. "You nearly choked them to death. That's what happened," Katsuki said, as he crouched down to examine your injury. Eijirou stared at him incredulously. "I would never." Katsuki flicked his fierce eyes to him. "Wanna bet?" he sneered, and brought his forefinger to your chin and jerked your head up. There lay the reddened indents of Eijirou's hands that were sure to bruise later. Eijirou falters at the sight, his eyes mist over as he struggles to believe what he sees. I wouldn't, he stutters. His hands move away from you, and you almost fall over, but Katsuki catches you, holding you to him as you finally catch your breath. "Eijirou wouldn't," you rasp, reaching for him, but his eyes were transfixed on your red skin. "Hey, relax, focus on breathing, dumbass," Katsuki ordered you softly, squeezing your arm gently to steady you. He didn't do it on purpose, it was those Faeries making him. Eijirou looks around with realization. "The pixies, they led us here." "A Fae meadow," he says with wonder. "I never thought I'd see one. Most people who come into these die," Katsuki finishes bluntly. "Figures, I let you do one night watch and you managed to fall into a fairy trap." The earth splits, and then the ground beneath them crumbles. You scream through your raw throat as you fall out of Katsuki's grip. You flail, trying to grab something to stop your descent. However, neither of your hands nor your eyes could catch a single thing in the darkness. You heard Eijirou shout for you, and then a flap of powerful wings. Something collided with you. I got you, I got you. He's flapping slowly, descending at a much slower rate. Katsuki, you say in panic, because Eijirou was not instantly zooming to catch him. Don't worry, he said. Katsuki has his own way of flying. Then, the bright explosions of Katsuki's magic cut through the darkness, and you relax into Eijirou's hold. You grip his shoulder, fighting the nauseating feeling of your feet dangling in open air. You and Eijirou landed next to Katsuki, knowing that only because his palms crackled to provide a little light. Shit, Katsuki grumbles. His eyes are not on them, but up to where you'd fallen. There was no hole, no inkling of the brightness of before. How is that possible? We just fell, you say, as you gape at the black. Fairy magic, Katsuki spat. They obviously want us here. He starts to move around the underground space, and Eijirou ushers you gently to follow. The fairies? You ask anxiously. Like Tinkerbell? What the fuck does bells that you tinker with have to do with fairies? Katsuki snaps. Okay, you think. That one's on you. Where are we? You ask instead. The entrance of the realm of Fae, Eijirou states. You notice that he held you loosely, like he was afraid to touch you, but also didn't want to risk losing you in unfamiliar territory. You think back to when Eijirou had almost hurt you and Katsuki before. You remember how guilty he'd felt, enough for careless words of others calling him a monster to make him plummet into sadness. You didn't want him to spiral again. You loop your arm through his, holding tightly even as he flinches and stiffens. You can barely make out his outline in the minimal light, and you're unsure of how much Eijirou can see in this darkness. But you smile reassuringly at him anyway, hoping that he'll understand that you didn't blame him, so he shouldn't blame himself either. Eventually, as they stumble their way through the tunnels, he relaxes and holds your hand a little firmer, a silent understanding. I thought the fairy realm would be greener, more flowers, and full of fairies, you say, your throat still sore and crying for some water or anything to soothe the burn. Though the pain was not unmanageable, you decided to try to keep talking to essential phrases only. Oh, the bastards are here, Katsuki grumbled. They just like to laugh at us lesser beings. They're enjoying watching us get lost. This is outside the Fae realm, like an entrance, Eijirou explained. They're a very proud species. Normally no one is allowed so close without being killed or used for entertainment. Fucking narcissistic, snobbish, prideful, petty bastards, Katsuki growled in distaste. I fear that your elaborations of us are quite negative and biased, considering that you are all those things, Katsuki. A woman's voice sings through the black. Katsuki stopped dead and groaned. Oh, for fuck's sake. Torches flare to life high above your heads, one by one igniting in flickering emerald fire. Their faint illumination revealed a spacious cavern around you, and a woman standing a small distance away, in a dress resembling the night sky. Long, black, and flowing to the ground, her dress was fitting and alive. Every inch held a dark butterfly whose little insect head gleamed white. It was elaborate, the most beautiful gown you'd ever seen, and it complemented the wearer's dark blonde hair and high crown. The crown was a shaped jewel, onyx, you assumed, and reflected that this person was of consequential importance. Katsuki growled at your side. Cami. He took a threatening step forward. Were you behind all of this? Trying to get Eijirou to kill the traveler? Why would I go through such a scheme to kill one insignificant human? she drawled. You pouted. Ouch, uncalled for. Hey, Eijirou defended. Traveler is not insignificant, and how dare you make me hurt them? Cammy glanced at him in disinterest. In any case, I only played out that little scene so you wouldn't hesitate to rush in and save them. You've always been too clever for your own good, Katsuki. Couldn't have you thinking too much. Katsuki exhaled, sharp and annoyed. What do you want, Cammy? He asked, each word sounding as though it was forced out of his mouth at gunpoint. There was an odd familiarity between the beautiful woman and Katsuki, in the way that he used an obvious nickname that may have once been affectionate, and more so in the wicked way she smiled at Katsuki, like she knew him. More than you or Eijirou. That weird familiarity drove you to ask, who are you? By the way Eijirou looked at Katsuki, a little sad and confused, you were sure he wanted to know as well. Katsuki breathed out through his teeth and reluctantly introduced. Camilla, the Queen of the Night Court. Eijirou's eyes widened comically. You know the Queen of the Night Court? Shut up, Katsuki snapped, the vein at his temple close to popping. He turned back to the woman in black. Cammy, what do you want? Cammy's smile took on an amused curve, as though seeing Katsuki teeming with irritation gave her great satisfaction. She stepped forward casually, slowly, her extravagant gown trailing behind. You weren't completely sure of her significance in their world, but as she grew closer, her beauty amplified. Each movement she made was lined with infinite grace. But she was not just a piece of art. Her dark eyes spoke the threat of her power, disguised under the pretty dress and fragile features. When she spoke, it was light and playful, but you didn't dare trust her words. Not when Katsuki's hackles were raised, and Eijirou was tense beside you. Rumors have been flying around about your little band of explorers, and it made me curious. I wanted to see for myself. She paused in front of you, and you resisted the urge to shrink back from her dark, calculating stare and cynical smile. How do you and Katsuki even know each other? Eijirou questioned tentatively. Cammy's sharp eyes flicked to Eijirou, and said cheerfully, as though saying that it was a bright and sunny day, we used to have sex. What? You and Eijirou shouted simultaneously, and looked directly to Katsuki for confirmation. Katsuki groaned. You don't have to tell everyone about that. I was merely answering a question, Katsuki, Cammy said with airy superiority. Finally, she walked to him, and he met her eyes in his glare. You left quite a mess when last I saw you. I did you a favor, Katsuki snarled. You were going to kill him yourself anyway. It's not my fault he attacked me first. Yes, true. But since I had to take care of everything after you escaped, I believe you owe me. She shifted her eyes away and back, as though considering. Entertain me. Katsuki's eyes narrowed, and he crossed his arms, obstinate. I'm not fucking with you. Cammy rolled her eyes and giggled. Not that kind of entertainment. She raised her palms to her lips, blowing a kiss that shimmered the air, and evolved into a glittering black butterfly. The little thing fluttered towards Katsuki, landing on his nose deftly, and then exploded all around them. You felt magic ripple through you briefly, like a wave of cold water, and in the next instant, you, Eijirou, and Katsuki were trapped in a black sphere. Katsuki charged forward, banging into the shimmering semi-translucent trap. Cammy, what the fuck? Do you remember our last conversation, Katsuki? She asked sweetly. You told me you couldn't fall in love with anyone. And yet, here I find you, attached to not one, but two lesser creatures. You touch the black surface of the force field, feeling the buzz of magic. Eijirou jabbed his hardened claws into the sphere, but yelped as one of his nails broke. "That won't work, little dragon," she warned. "You are merely a whelp, but I am 1,000 years of cultivated power." Her factitious smile dropped, her expression finally matching her eyes. "So fucking what if I'm attached? That doesn't mean I'm in love with them," Katsuki yelled. Cammy merely hummed non-committal. "Here's my deal for you." She stepped close to Katsuki. If not for the sphere separating them, they would be breathing each other's air. "You can kiss one of them, and you and that person will be free of the sphere. Or you can kiss both of them, and only the one you love the most will leave with you. The other will be left in my care, and belong to me until their mortal life ends." Cammy glanced at you and Eijirou. "I would prefer the dragon, if you're feeling generous, Katsuki. He'll last longer in Faerie, but the choice is yours. You have a human day to decide." She turned on her heel and walked away. Katsuki banged onto the sphere, screaming, "Get back here right now! Cammy, fucking let us go!" She didn't flinch, stepping through the rocks across the cavern. The solid stone rippled like a pond as she disappeared past it.